Bellwood, Texas, a small, dry town nestled between dusty fields and a lonely highway. At first glance, it looks as peaceful as any other southern town, but appearances can be deceiving. Under the iron rule of former Sheriff Frank Dugan, Bellwood has become a kingdom of corruption. The police here don't protect the people, they exploit them. Local businesses are forced to pay tribute. Citizens live in fear. Anyone who dares to resist faces ruthless consequences. And today, one man has returned to change it all. Marcus Reed, a former U.S. Army officer, a battle-hardened warrior with nearly 2 decades of service, leading special ops teams through life-or-death missions in the Middle East. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a leader, a fighter who knew no fear. Discharged after an injury in his final mission, Marcus searched for a new purpose. He couldn't just stand by and watch the world descend into chaos. Then an opportunity arose. Bellwood needed a new sheriff. The town council wanted someone who could fix the system. But Marcus knew they didn't truly believe he could pull it off. His first morning on the job, Marcus stepped into the Bellwood Police Department, his new uniform crisp, his gaze sharp, but all around him, nothing but cold stares. Some officers murmured among themselves. Others smirked, barely hiding their contempt. This guy thinks he can change Bellwood? Just another fool who believes justice can beat money. Marcus said nothing. He simply stood there, slowly scanning the room. He knew exactly what he had walked into, a den of wolves. But he wasn't the prey. A storm was coming to Bellwood. Marcus stepped into the Bellwood Sheriff's office, slamming the door shut behind him. The air inside was thick, suffocating. He had been here for weeks, yet he never truly felt like he belonged. The officers still didn't trust him. Every time he walked past them, they looked at him as if he were an intruder. Frank Dugan's presence still lingered. Even though the man had left this office, his shadow loomed over everything. Marcus knew this wouldn't be easy. From day one, he had begun implementing the necessary reforms. There was no room for leniency when it came to crime. The department's records were being re-examined. Suppressed evidence, buried cases, everything had to be brought to light. He enforced strict disciplinary rules, requiring every officer to report suspicious activities, follow proper procedures, and operate under tight supervision. Not a single case would slip past him. But it wasn't that simple. The officers in the department didn't just refuse to support him, they openly resisted. Some, like Officer Jones, even started mocking him outright. "Marcus, you can't always be the military," Jones sneered during a meeting, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "This is law enforcement. We don't follow your stupid army rules here." But Marcus didn't get angry. He didn't have time for childish games. He kept pushing forward, determined to maintain control. There was just one problem. The more he tried to reform the system, the more enemies he made. A few younger officers had secretly started approaching him. They knew that if Bellwood was ever going to change, they had to stand with Marcus. But fear was deeply ingrained in them. Former Sheriff Dugan still held enormous influence. Anyone who dared to oppose him had faced severe consequences. So they only whispered to Marcus when no one else was around, passing him information in secret. But none of them were willing to take a public stand. Marcus knew there were those who wanted change, but he also knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed real allies, people who would stand beside him in this fight. But did anyone have the courage to go up against the deeply entrenched corruption within the department? The answer remained unclear, but Marcus wasn't stopping. He continued watching, continued investigating, and one by one, the puppets within Bellwood's corrupt system began to reveal themselves.
Marcus was sitting in his office when a sudden phone call startled him. Tina, his secretary, spoke through the intercom. "Mr. Reed, there's an urgent situation that needs your immediate attention. You'd better check the security footage from the Cornerstone Bar." Less than 30 minutes later, Marcus stood in front of the computer screen, the harsh glow reflecting in his eyes. What he saw made his stomach turn. A black teenager, with no prior record, being dragged out of a car by 4 police officers. The next scene showed them mercilessly beating him. Punches, kicks to the stomach and face. He didn't resist, didn't fight back, but they kept going, all because they suspected him of stealing a car. No weapon, no solid evidence, just blind suspicion. The following footage made Marcus's throat tighten. One of the officers, seemingly Officer Lewis, grabbed the victim's phone and stared directly into the security camera before erasing all evidence. Without hesitation, Marcus picked up the phone, calling the few allies he had managed to gather over the past weeks. He needed to secure this footage. He couldn't let them get away with it. Tina, call the Internal Affairs Division. This video is all I have, and I need it protected. But despite his efforts, the truth was already being twisted. The corrupt officers began intimidating witnesses, warning that anyone who testified against them would face consequences. Tina reported back, her voice tense. "Boss, I just got word from a contact in the prosecutor's office. They're saying this case is going to be delayed. Dugan has powerful connections. The state authorities have intervened." Her words hit Marcus like a slap to the face. He had expected resistance, but not this quickly. The corrupt machine of Bellwood was already in motion, working to bury the truth. "This can't be happening," Marcus roared, his fists clenched. He felt trapped in the very system he was trying to dismantle. For every step forward, he was shoved 3 steps back. He sat in silence for a few minutes, frustration weighing on him. But he couldn't stop now. He had sworn, back in the army, never to back down from a fight, no matter how impossible it seemed. "No, I won't let them bury this. I won't let justice be erased." And so, Marcus began forming a new plan, how to retrieve the evidence before it was wiped out for good. He wouldn't let Bellwood's corruption stand any longer. This wasn't just another case of police misconduct. This was a battle between right and wrong, between justice and corruption. And Marcus, the former army soldier, now sheriff, had to choose between following the rules or risking everything to take them down.
Marcus wasted no time. As soon as the scandal broke, he ordered an internal investigation. "Tina, send all case files to Internal Affairs. I want everything brought to light immediately," Marcus commanded, his voice firm. But as the investigative team got to work, they quickly realized that every trace of evidence had been erased. Security footage files were gone, reports had been altered, everything seemed to have been wiped clean. It felt like every move Marcus made was met with ruthless resistance. Witnesses had gone silent, and some had even mysteriously disappeared. Fear had gripped the small town. The corruption within the department wasn't just intimidating people, it was making them question if anyone had the courage to fight back. Standing in the middle of the investigation room, Marcus narrowed his eyes in frustration. He knew the system was protecting itself. "Damn it!" he growled internally, but he refused to let his emotions take over. He decided to seek help from outside forces. Picking up his phone, he called an old ally from the FBI. It was a risky move, but if he didn't act fast, the truth would be buried forever. But every effort he made was blocked. "Marcus, I get it, but you know how this works." "No one wants to get involved," his FBI contact said, his voice rushed and hesitant. "Dugan has deep ties with powerful people up top. Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus placed a hand on the desk, frustration boiling inside him. This system was too strong. It protected itself like an impenetrable force, crushing anyone who dared to stand against it, whether they were a veteran, a sheriff, or anyone else. He took a deep breath. "With or without help, I'm doing what's right. I can't back down now." Marcus's fight was turning into an uphill battle, an uneven war. But no matter how powerful the system was, he would not go down without a fight. Marcus felt like he was walking on the edge of a knife. One wrong step could lead to his downfall. But he knew he couldn't stop. This corrupt system had to be exposed, and no matter how hard the fight, he would see it through until the truth was brought to light. He decided to use every intelligence skill he had learned during his years in the military. He recalled the covert methods of gathering information, the patience required for observation and analysis. Facing Dugan head-on would only end in failure, but Marcus knew that with his training, he could discreetly collect evidence that these corrupt officers wouldn't even realize was missing. Late at night, Marcus slipped into one of the police department's record storage rooms. Using techniques he had mastered over the years, unwavering focus and meticulous precision, he carefully sifted through stacks of files. His eyes lit up as he uncovered hidden reports, documents proving the shady dealings between Dugan and his associates. These files could be the missing puzzle pieces needed to dismantle the corruption network, but they also meant that Marcus had just put himself directly in Dugan's crosshairs. With enough evidence in hand, Marcus needed a new strategy. He knew the system wouldn't accept change without resistance. He reached out to an investigative journalist named Rachel Hayes, an industry veteran known for exposing high-profile scandals. Rachel wasn't the type to be bought off, and that made her the perfect ally to bring the truth to light. "Marcus, I understand what you're up against, and I'll help you," Rachel said over the phone, her voice resolute. "But we have to be careful. I'll make sure this story goes public, but I need airtight proof, something they can't deny." For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. This was his chance to shatter the silence in Bellwood, to bring down a power structure that had controlled everything for far too long. He knew this move would ignite an all-out war, but if he didn't take action, the truth would remain buried forever. "Thank you, Rachel," Marcus said, a rare sense of reassurance settling over him. "We're going to bring everything to light." Both of them knew this wouldn't be easy, but at least now they had evidence and a plan. The wheels were finally in motion.
Marcus stood outside Rachel's newsroom, gripping a folder filled with irrefutable evidence of Dugan's corruption. The weight of the entire town seemed to press down on his shoulders. He knew that once these documents went public, there would be no turning back. This was the final battle, and this time he wouldn't let the truth be buried. As soon as he stepped out of his car, a black truck skidded to a stop nearby. The roar of engines filled the air, followed by the clanking of boots on pavement. A group of uniformed officers emerged, their weapons trained on Marcus. This wasn't just an intimidation tactic, this was an ambush. "This time you're not walking away," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with menace. Marcus didn't flinch. He had faced worse in combat. His pulse steadied, muscles coiled, instincts taking over. The moment the first officer moved, Marcus reacted. A gunshot cracked through the night, missing him by inches. He pivoted, grabbing the nearest attacker's arm and twisting it with brutal efficiency. The officer let out a pained grunt as his weapon clattered to the ground. Marcus used him as a human shield, dodging another shot before driving his elbow into the next man's throat. The chaos erupted in seconds, fists, gunfire, and adrenaline-fueled precision. A blow to his ribs sent pain lancing through his body, but Marcus didn't stop. He had survived battlefields far worse than this. He took down another opponent, disarming him with practiced ease until the remaining officers hesitated. Bloodied and breathing hard, Marcus stood his ground, staring down the men who had tried to kill him. They might have delayed him, but they hadn't stopped him. As the officers retreated, Marcus knew this was far from over. His body ached, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He couldn't fight this war alone. He returned to the police station, seeking out the few officers he still trusted, those who hadn't given in to fear or corruption. "We need to stand together," Marcus said, his voice unwavering. "Dugan can't win. Not this time." Beyond the force, he reached out to old comrades, veterans who had fought by his side in war, men who understood the cost of justice. They knew who Marcus was, and they knew he wouldn't call them unless the fight was worth it. Slowly, a resistance formed. Honest cops, war-hardened soldiers, and civilians who had suffered under the weight of corruption. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they had something Dugan's men never would: truth and courage. Marcus smiled grimly, wiping the blood from his lip. This fight wasn't over, not even close. Nightfall descended, casting dim lights over the outskirts of Bellwood. Marcus and his team, comprised of a few honest officers and battle-hardened veterans, moved cautiously toward the warehouse they believed to be the site of a major drug deal between Dugan and the cartel. Everything had to go perfectly. One misstep, and everything they had worked for would be lost. Marcus divided his team into 3 smaller units, positioning them at key entry points. Every step they took was calculated, their eyes sharp, missing no detail. They were ready, but Marcus couldn't shake the tension in his chest. He knew this would be the decisive showdown, not just against Dugan, but against himself. As they neared the warehouse, they spotted Dugan and the cartel completing a large transaction. There was no turning back now. Marcus signaled his team to move in. Gunfire erupted instantly. The sharp crack of bullets tore through the air, echoing through the night. The criminals reacted fast, firing back with relentless force, but Marcus and his team had prepared for this. Every shot they took was precise, but not without sacrifice. A sudden, searing pain shot through Marcus's left shoulder. A bullet had pierced through his vest. But he didn't stop. He moved swiftly, dodging, countering, and pushing his team forward, urging them to stay in the fight. Amid the intense firefight, his team gradually gained the upper hand. Eventually, Marcus closed in on Dugan, who was desperately trying to escape. But this time, there was nowhere to run. Marcus lunged at him, taking him down just as he reached for his gun. The fight was over. In Marcus's hands were the very documents, recordings, and hard evidence they had risked everything to obtain, proof of Dugan's drug operations and the corruption infesting the police force. Dugan was bound tightly, his face twisted in anger and frustration. Marcus said nothing. He just stared at him, his eyes cold, filled with unwavering resolve. The war was over. At last, Marcus and his team had secured every piece of incriminating evidence against Dugan and the cartel. His wounds ached, but it didn't matter. This victory was proof that justice would always prevail.
The moment Dugan was taken into custody, the case quickly caught the attention of the FBI. With undeniable evidence in hand, corrupt officers within the Bellwood Police Department were brought to trial. Despite efforts from the old power structure to derail the investigation, justice ultimately prevailed. Those who once wielded power now had to face the severe consequences of their corruption and abuse of authority. Bellwood, a town long plagued by fear and corruption, finally began to change. The people, who had spent years living in anxiety and distrust of law enforcement, could finally breathe a sigh of relief. They could once again believe in a police force that existed to protect them, not exploit them. But Marcus didn't stop there. After this victory, he continued recruiting dedicated officers, determined to reform the system and ensure that no one could ever abuse their power again. Bellwood began to heal, and the scars of its corrupt past slowly faded. From the battlefield to the boardroom, Marcus had proven that the strength and determination of a soldier could change everything, no matter how great the challenge. The town wasn't just saved by justice, it was saved by the courage of one man, a soldier turned police chief who dared to stand against corruption within his own community. This story concludes with a powerful message that lingers in the hearts of many. The most dangerous enemy is not the one on the battlefield, but those who abuse power right beside us. Only those who dare to stand up can bring about change. Marcus Reed didn't just win the battle against corruption. He proved that courage and perseverance can make a difference. He fought not just for justice, but for the belief in a fair society where power is not wielded to oppress the innocent. His story serves as a reminder that sometimes the strongest people are not those who carry guns, but those who dare to stand against oppression and fight for justice.